Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Azure Local. The first rule of Azure Local is you do not talk about Azure Stack HCI. The second rule of Azure Local is you do not talk about Azure Stack HCI. The third rule, if your latency is too high, if your compliance demands local data of the cloud just isn't enough, Azure Local is here to save the day. Fourth rule, one host at a time. Just kidding, you can scale as much as you want. Fifth rule, it's not just about VMs. Azure Local runs services like databases, apps, and AI models, all in your own data center. Sixth rule, Azure Local connects to the cloud, but stays close. Low latency, security, control. And the seventh and final rule, if this is your first time hearing about Azure Local, buckle up, because it's about to change the way you think about hybrid cloud. Hello and welcome to another Synextra video. I'm Chris, a consultant in the project delivery team, and today we're going to be discussing Azure Local. So Azure Local isn't completely new. In fact, it's essentially an evolution of Azure Stack. Azure Stack primarily comprises three main products. First, you have Azure Stack HCI, which is an on-premises infrastructure solution built on Hyper-V and Storage Spaces Direct. You get all the pros of a hyper-converged infrastructure architecture. So what's basically your storage, compute, and networking consolidated into a single, easy-to-manage entity, as you would with technologies like vSAN or Nutanix. But you also get the benefit of it being integrated with Azure services like backup, monitoring, and disaster recovery, which it does use in Azure Arc. Then you have Azure Stack Hub, which is more of an extension of Azure into your on-premises environment. Typically, you'll work with a solutions provider who'll be responsible for deploying Azure Stack Hub on site, and then they'll offer ongoing support in partnership with Microsoft. What makes it more than an integrated hardware system is the fact that it delivers a consistent Azure environment on premises. So you can deploy Azure services such as VMs, functions, and Kubernetes on premises directly from the Azure portal. Finally, you have Azure Stack Edge. Now, this is a bit niche, but it's basically a hardware appliance that you can either rent or purchase from Microsoft. And it primarily allows you to process data and run AI and machine learning workloads close to your on-premises data. Now, there's one technology that isn't technically part of Azure Stack, but it complements it and works alongside it very well. And that is Azure Arc. So as I say, it's technically not part of Azure Stack, but it's used to enable many parts of it. And it is something that can be used to help bring your workloads that are hosted outside of Azure into the Azure management plane and to enhance things like monitoring and security visibility. And as you'll see, it continues to serve that purpose and more under Azure Local. Azure Local replaces Azure Stack HCI, but with that it introduces a number of improvements. So with Azure Local, you can choose from hundreds of different hardware products from well-known vendors such as Dell, Lenovo, and HP. You purchase the kit you want, and then you install the Azure Local software yourself. That hardware can then be managed via the Azure portal, and enabled by Azure Arc, the physical on-site hardware entities become cloud resources. Once initially set up, things like the cluster, storage, and networking can all be configured in the portal without having to connect to anything directly on premises. And now that it's in the portal, you'll benefit from all those things that the cloud is good for, such as consistency and repeatability. If you need to deploy the same hardware configuration to different distributed locations, you can leverage the infrastructure as code to do so. You can also orchestrate software and driver updates for your on-premises Azure Local hardware from the portal. Building on Azure Stack Hub and the resources that it allows you to deploy, you'll see that Azure Local allows you to provision a larger number of Azure native workloads on premises. So we have virtual machines. Hopefully by now we all know what these are. AKS, Azure's managed Kubernetes service. Containerized apps, which are probably the more modern counterpart to legacy VMs. AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop. Windows 10 or 11 multi-session has been very popular due to the fact you can provide users with the look and feel of a familiar operating system whilst providing the cost advantages of multi-session, along with the use of existing per-user Windows licensing. Now, normally Windows 10 or 11 multi-session is exclusive to Azure Virtual Desktop, but with Azure Local, you're able to bring this on-premises and reap the benefits, all while keeping control and meeting any unique business requirements that you might have. With downgrade application services, so things like app services, functions, logic apps, Azure Local now allows you to bring these popular serverless resources into your on-premises environment. data services, so Arc-enabled SQL Server or SQL Managed Instance. And then to round it off, we have AI services. Now, these are in preview at the moment, and I guess they sort of touch on some of the capabilities of Azure Stack Edge, but it's not something that there's a massive amount of information on at the minute, so we'll wait and see what comes out of that in the future. If we go back to VMs, despite the fact that Microsoft has started to call VMs legacy resources, chances are the vast majority of you will be using them in abundance. And so with Azure Local, your on-premises VMs benefit from a lot of the features that Azure native ones do. All of the Arc-enabled VMs on Azure Local are essentially ARM resources, exactly the same way that Azure VMs are. That means you can take advantage of things like Azure RBAC to manage privileged access, templates for consistent deployment, marketplace and gallery images, VM extensions, so things like AD join and custom scripts, and other Azure services such as Azure Monitor, Azure Policy, and Defender for Cloud. As well as the powerful management capabilities of Azure Arc, you'll also likely benefit from being able to deploy from ARM templates, Bicep, and things like Terraform. But more fundamentally, it's the fact that you can manage all of your cloud and on-premises VMs from a single pane of glass, which is essentially the Azure portal. Now, when it comes to security, I mentioned Defender for Cloud, but out of the box, there's a whole host of security defaults built into the Azure Local product, as well as integrated tools for things like drift control on top of security stalwarts such as Trusted Launch and the ability to leverage things like TPM. As well as that, there are features that you wouldn't necessarily see in something like Hyper-V, such as network security groups, which allow you to micro-segment and secure east to west traffic between your local VMs. This brings it more in line with the sort of features that you might see in VMware and more specifically NSX. On top of the core functionality of Azure Local, you have a few new features that are currently in preview, but I can't imagine it will be long until they're public. With Azure Local, the entry-level hardware requirements will be a lot lower, opening up opportunities to use it in settings such as retail or manufacturing that perhaps previously would have been cost prohibitive. So for example, we've gone from a minimum of 2 physical servers to 1 or more. A minimum of 4 disks is now just 1. A minimum of 10 gig networking is now just 1 gig. And then there's also no longer a requirement for Active Directory. And if the thought of getting rid of Active Directory excites you, check out our previous video on abandoning AD. Disconnected operations. So this allows you to run a reduced subset of services locally whilst being permanently disconnected from the cloud. It does this using an appliance VM that runs a control plane. So if you operate in a highly regulated environment where cloud connectivity is not an option, you can still leverage a lot of the great features of Azure whilst keeping control and data on premises. And then we also have the Migrate from VMware feature. So you'll be able to leverage Azure Migrate to move workloads directly from VMware to Azure Local in the same way you can currently do this from VMware to Azure Cloud. So when it comes to use cases, a lot of them are fairly niche and sit within industries that fall outside your typical corporate environments. So with manufacturing, we're talking about mission-critical workloads that need near real-time communications at continuous and low latency. So think factories where any interruption to production would be disastrous and impact revenue. Remote locations, places that may not benefit from reliable connectivity, such as oil rigs or ships. And then you have highly regulated industries, so scenarios where things like data sovereignty or security are paramount. And it's the ideal opportunity for Azure Local to be used to realize the benefits of a modern cloud solution whilst allowing you to retain control. Hopefully this has given you some insight into Azure Local and how it is built upon the previous successes of Azure Stack. I've been Chris. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop a comment on this video. But until next time, thanks for watching and take care.
Stop.